Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Andre, and I'm discussing or analyzing what the weights in the NFL mean. More specifically, what kind of goal weights do you need to hit in order to be considered to play in the NFL or to follow those descriptive statistics from different positions in the NFL? For this data, so I actually collected data on height, weight, position, age, and team for every currently rostered player in the NFL. So every player that's on a practice squad, on a roster, every player in the NFL, I collected this data, put it on an Excel spreadsheet, got to do some of those fun filters with height, weight, positions. And then I also did some data analysis where I analyzed specific positions in the NFL. So I analyzed just 4 of the positions out of the many, mostly ones that are most recognizable to people who are not NFL fans. So I analyzed quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, and defensive tackles just to show their different weight distributions. Just wanted to give you guys a couple examples of the different body types that I'll be analyzing. I am also a Rams fan, so all of these people are going to be on the Rams current roster. They are all starting players, and yes, thank you for the congratulations on the Super Bowl. But on the left here, we have Matthew Stafford, who is the starting quarterback for the Rams. As you can tell by his picture, he's tall, he's 6'3". I do know that off the top of my head. He isn't super muscular. You can tell by his biceps and his shoulders that those are probably going to be some of the strongest muscles in his body, but he's not super, super lean. Kind of has, the dad gut on him, but mostly quarterbacks will be built taller and leaner. On the right, we have Cooper Kupp, the Rams starting wide receiver. Cooper Kupp, also very lean, leaner than quarterbacks, specifically Matthew Stafford. He's super fast, not a ton of muscle on him. And that's kind of how wide receivers have to function in the NFL in order to be successful. Different body types. Here we have Cam Akers on the left, who is the running back for the Rams. You can tell he's a little bit more muscular than the two. His quads are bigger, biceps are bigger, shoulders are bigger. Not a lot of body fat on him either. He is also shorter than the other two. Running backs, they're one of their main purposes is to run through defensive lines. So he's got to get lower to the ground, be a little bit more muscular to power through those bigger guys. And just to show you the type of guy that he is running against, on the right here, we have Aaron Donald, who is the Rams' premier defensive tackle. This man is ginormous, super heavy, super muscular. A lot of defensive tackles actually have more body fat than Aaron Donald do as well. So he's a little bit on the leaner side, but he's a large man. Muscle definition everywhere. You can see how large his chest, shoulders, arms, quads, even his calves are huge. So these defensive tackles have to be big because their goal is to stop people. Moving on, so I started with analyzing the overall weight distribution within the NFL. You can see that this histogram here shows kind of a bimodal distribution, which is super interesting. And I also think that this has to do a lot with there's so many different positions in the NFL. You can be super position specific, or you can just be, like a defensive tackle who's on that D line. They've got a couple of those each play. So the average weight in the NFL is going to be around 244 pounds. With a huge range. I mean, the minimum here, 165. I don't know how that player even remotely begins to play in the NFL. And then with the maximum at 380, which is just a massive, massive person. And you can see here that we do have a couple outliers, which would be those guys that we just talked about. But mostly a lot of NFL players looks like they're going to be in that 200 to 261 range right here, with a couple being up here over at the 300 to 320. Probably a lot of our alignment. Starting with quarterback specific data, if you look, pretty normal distribution. Yes, there's a couple outliers here as well. With the heaviest quarterback being 262 pounds, and the lightest being 196. This would be about like a 70-ish pounds difference. So there's a lot of wiggle room in the NFL to be, quarterback at a specific weight. Average is at 220 pounds. And I also think, they are leaner guys. They do have to be taller. And again, I didn't necessarily compare height to weight, just because I wanted to be concerned with what goal weight can you reach in order to play in the NFL. Now you can look more specifically at heights. If you were say you're 5'8", you can look to see which players are 5'8", what their weight is, what your goal is to get there. 220 pounds for the quarterback. Super light, taller guys, not a lot of muscle. Moving on, running backs. Their average weight is at 214, which is actually almost the same as a quarterback. However, you have to keep in mind that running backs are going to be shorter than quarterbacks. Also a little bit more muscular as well. So they're going to have more muscle. And considering the height difference between the two positions, I think it's super interesting that there's only a 6-pound difference in the mean. And then here we have a range of a minimum at 175, maximum at 300. You can tell that 300 is just one outlier way over here. And again, this follows that normal distribution, with a lot of our running backs falling in that 205 to 215 bucket. Now for wide receiver data, you can see that this wide receiver data, again, a little bit normal distributed, but it doesn't have as much variation from it. That curve is slightly flatter, therefore there's a little bit more wiggle room in these weight buckets here. A lot of people fall in between 220 to 173 pounds to that 221 pound range. So much more slack in your weight, much more variation in the weights currently in the NFL for those wide receivers. Their average weight is going to be the lightest that we look at, 200 pounds, just because they have to be super fast, super lean, not a lot of muscle or body fat to slow them down, with a minimum of 165 and a maximum to 240. You can see this range is actually the smallest range we're going to get to, which is super interesting because the majority of the players actually fall into a wider distribution than those previous two. And then finally, the defensive tackle data that I gathered. I just wanted to throw this in because I wanted to compare a body type that was severely different from the prior three. You can tell this distribution, again, normal, again, has outliers. However, the majority at least fall into a 40-pound range right here. With the mean being at 308 pounds, rounding up, with a minimum, the lightest defensive tackle is 277 pounds. The heaviest is 360. Again, not a super far spread, but you've got to be a heavy dude in order to be a good defensive tackle to make it into the NFL. So just summarizing all the different weights you can see here: quarterbacks, running backs, wide receiver, defensive tackle. All this has to do a lot with their body composition. And then I just wanted to point out that this data does fall short. I didn't account for the age of the player. I didn't find any statistics for muscle percentage versus fat percentage. So their overall body composition. I also didn't take into consideration bone density or height. I watch a lot of football, so I do know that different positions kind of average to be taller, shorter, bigger. smaller and bulkier, smaller muscular, stuff like that. So I hope those little tidbits of information that I put in there kind of help that out. And then just my citation. I appreciate you guys watching my presentation. Thank you. And I hope you guys all enjoyed it and maybe learned something about the NFL. So thank you.